talk, live chat, and a little bit of background about today's live chat, because I sort of this morning I chose this subject completely at random, and during the day I thought about it a bit, and as a result I've changed my mind on some of the things. So that it's obviously not a good thing to sort of change your mind like half an hour before the video goes up. So I might even be a bit disjointed there in some of the conclusions which I will draw. I'm going to talk about Major General Kurt Eberhard, a character who is not particularly well known to history, although he was responsible for the largest shooting mass murder in history. If you go to the site of Babi Yar today, you'll find there's a big park. It's well within the city of Kyiv, or cities all around it, and even it was also all around most of it in 1941. If you look at a map of the city, the park itself is largely, the whole thing is a memorial to what actually happened there, and it's quite obviously it's used by the locals for walking the dogs and doing other things that you might want to do, going for walks, but the memorials are all over the place. So this and most of these memorials are new. So this wasn't done in Soviet times, where these things served a propaganda purpose, but they didn't really to commemorate the dead. That wasn't so important. Another thing which is really important about the Babi Yar Memorial and the park, the area around it, in 1961 there was a major mudslide there, and what happened was in 1950 the authorities decided that there was a lot of slurry. It had come from brick manufacturer, and they decided they had to do something with this slurry. So the slurry, I think the aim was to actually drain it off into the ravine itself at Babi Yar, and then I suppose eventually it's going to make its way to the Dnieper or somewhere. And now this is something which is ecologically, I don't think that this would have been acceptable in Western Europe or North America at the time. I don't think, I can't say for certain, I don't know. But so normally if there was something like this, I think it would have been taken away in trucks or whatever. But there's a huge amount of it. There was 600,000 cubic meters of slurry. That was the amount of that actually was in the mudslides. How much there was to start off with, I don't really know. The problem, what happened was that it sort of broke its banks. Maybe the water level rose, and this then engulfed housing areas in the region, but it completely changed the topography. Now, the amount of people who were killed was probably around 100 and I can't remember the exact, something 135 or something like that now, and but the Times even believed there was even more killed. But I think there are subsequent studies that were done 4 or 5 years ago have actually showed that the Soviet numbers were actually the correct ones. I mean, because the Soviet Union said it, you automatically assume it's incorrect. But that would appear to have been the case. And a major ecological disaster, of which there were many in the Soviet Union. One thing about Soviet propaganda that I didn't believe much of it, but I did believe that they were quite positive on the ecological front. But now we know of all these things that happened, that they showed utterly no concern for the environment whatsoever. And bear in mind, showing concern for the environment is also showing concern for people's lives as well. Anyway, so should you ever be there, say that, because often I show things and I say, well, this is, you can sometimes you can sort of imagine what it looked like during the events I'm describing, but in this case you just can't at all, really. There is still a ravine there, but it's the ravine, the time was about 15 meters deep, but it was really, really wide. And one of the things that happened as a result of the killings that took place there was that the Wehrmacht engineers actually blew up parts of the ravine walls. So the ravine gradually became thinner and thinner. And today it's really not much more than that of a gully. There's a word in Russian that actually describes it quite well. Well, actually, a yar is a sort of a a ravine in Russian. So it just doesn't look as it did look. Now, there's another thing which is important, because it took this massacre which took place on 29th, 30th of September 1941, but this wasn't the only one. That was about 1/3 of the people who were actually killed there. I've done other videos where I talk about Sonderkommando 1005. I've talked about in videos the revolt that took place at Babi Yar in 1943, and the fact that, you know, after the revolt, there were people who got out and actually testified as to what was happening there. So there was probably as many as 100,000 people who actually killed there under Nazi occupied times, because under the communist times, people were murdered there as well. So it's both. It had been used by the NKVD. Many murder sites had been previously used by the NKVD. This wasn't just the Nazis just continued doing the same thing as the NKVD had been doing. So for that, but so there was this massacre took place on 29th, 30th of September. There was other 1st of October, 2nd of October, 8th of October. I think it was the 12th or the 14th of October. There were follow-up massacres that kept on happening, and then people were just kept there from time to time. Indeed, the first killing that took place there was on the 27th of September, when they took the people who were in a mental care home to the massacre to the site and had them shot there. So this location was a location that continued to be used for quite a long time. But now I've sort of got ahead of myself somewhat. But I think as I'm talking about Babi Yar, it's this character, Major General Kurt Eberhard. I think the question has got to be, why was it him? The time that this took place, the 33,771 people who were murdered on those 2 days, he was 67 years old, and at 67 you might have thought he should have known better. Now, sometimes I'm not trying to excuse those kids or whatever, you know, the 20-year-olds and things that took place that committed murders and what have you. But as somebody who was 67, he was well in his 50s by the time when Hitler came to power. In fact, he was almost 60 when Hitler came to power. He hadn't gone through the Nazi system. He had been indoctrinated. Yet he appears to have been one of the people who were responsible for this massacre. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say why. Actually, in my video, which I sort of did on him, I didn't say why. And now I sort of just described the facts, but I didn't give the analysis. So I'm going to give the analysis now, and I might put the analysis in the video sometime in the future. Eberhard, he was born in Rottweil, which is in Baden-Württemberg. That's where I live in Germany as well. And quite a number of the criminals do come from Baden-Württemberg, and I'm unable to explain that. On the 3rd of August 1892, he joined the army. So he joined as an officer cadet. It was called a Fahrenjunker, and this was in the army of the states. Now, there wasn't really a German army as such, because they all had their different states. You know, Hitler, for example, was not in the German army; he was in the Bavarian army. And Bismarck, when he was well, of course, that was not a fair example. But in the case of Eberhard, he was he was in the local army of the time, and so the 4th Württemberg Field Artillery Regiment was the one he joined during the First World War, though it had gone to the Prussian War Academy. So if you like, that it was Germany was an empire. It was made up of various states, and so the various states each had their own armies. But when he did his advanced training, I should say, he went to the Prussian War Academy. So they would, which was in Berlin. So when the First World War started, he'd have been 40 years old, well, 39 years old, nearly 40, and so he went. He was a battery commander. He deployed Eastern Front. He was promoted to major during the war, so he's 41 years old, or sorry, 40 years old, and he's promoted to major. And so he went through the war on both fronts, Western and Eastern. And like many people, he was moved from the Eastern to the Western, obviously in 1917, because the Russians pulled out. And so when the war ended, he was demobilized. And then what would he do after that? It would be rather difficult. He'd been in the army all his life, and he couldn't really do anything else. But so he was unemployed, but he wasn't unemployed for very long. He went into what was called Provisional Reichswehr, and he went into that. So it's the German army after the First World War, but the proper army hasn't been set up yet. So that was on the 1st of July 1919. And he was the commander of the 5th Reichswehr Artillery Regiment. Now, you've got to bear in mind, of course, that competition for doing things like this was really tough. There's very few places available, and lots of people wanted them because during the war in Germany, there was a really difficult situation. There was a shortage of food. The economy of the country had collapsed. The reason the economy of the country had collapsed was largely because of everything was being diverted into war production. And the second thing is that it was the way that the war was actually paid for, using bonds, which didn't help either. So that both things were a mistake. One thing I came across recently was for the fact that, for example, in potatoes require a copper something, or I've forgotten what it was now. It's a fertilizer, but no fertilizer from copper was being used, and because it was all being used in electrical equipment and shell casings. Another thing, the best example was potassium, also used in the fertilizer industry, but none of this was finding its way into fertilizer. It was all finding itself into military production, and as a result, there's no the crops aren't growing. So the two things stand to reason. And it's often blamed on the blockade, but I think this argument's quite nonsensical. To be quite honest, Germany occupied huge areas of Europe. The reason why there was starvation in Germany was mainly because of the disruption by the war, and the fact that fertilizers weren't being produced, and the fact that people are being taken away from agricultural production and put into the military. And the same thing happened in Russia. That's why the army collapsed, because there were so many people. The mobilization had been really successful, got lots of people in the army, and nobody's producing food. Nobody produces food, therefore no one's got anything to eat, and so on. So that's how it happened. Now, in his case, he was able to stay in the army and get back into the army, and then he had a sort of a career in the interwar period. So he's based in Ulm, and on his just before his 50th birthday, just after his 50th birthday, 25th of March, 31st of March 1925, he was demobbed. He was relieved of his duty, retired from active service, and on his last day at work, they promoted him to Major General, and so that seemed okay. Now he's got a pension, retired at an early age, so he's got another 20 plus years to go, let's hope, and so he should have been all right. Now the thing was, of course, that armies tend to attract people from some more nationalist backgrounds. They tend to, and he was certainly one of the people like this. Now, under the Weimar Republic, the army was supposed to be neutral, and soldiers didn't even have the right to vote. But under the Nazis, this changed. So Hitler wanted a National Socialist army, a people's army. And it would seem actually that Eberhard had these type of ideas, but he wasn't a member of the Nazi Party until 1938. So he'd left the army 13 years earlier, and so he didn't join until then. And on Hitler's 50th birthday, 20th of April 1939, Eberhard joined the SS, and so he got an SS rank of Standartenführer, which is approximately that of a colonel. And so that was lower than the military rank he held, which was Major General. And then he got a rank of SS Oberführer. Oberführer is sort of an honorary rank, which doesn't have any equivalent that I'm aware of. He made his way up further, became Brigadeführer later, but that was later. Like many people with military backgrounds, just before the war started, he was recalled. Now, this is a normal procedure in any army. 26th of August 1939, he's 65 years old, reactivated into the army, but he doesn't get a field command. So what they probably did with him is they probably called him to an army base, gave him a nice room, told him when the dinner was served, and let him get on with it. So he was assigned to the staff of the commander of a rear area, where he headed an organization of artillery units on the eastern bank of the Rhine. So whilst the war was going on in Poland, he was over there, and he was looking at artillery units and things like this. And but his unit, which was named after him, was dissolved on the 7th of July 1940, following the victory in France. So he was on a very quiet part of the front. And on the 13th of May 1941, he took over as the command of Feldkommand, the security division, should we say, 195, Feldkommandatur 195, set up on the 29th of May 1941 in the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. So he was given the job, but the unit didn't actually exist yet. So it was an idea, but then they did it. And so this became part of the 454th Security Division in Kyiv. He was appointed to be the city commander of Kyiv. Memory serves me correctly, it was the 8th of July 1941. 8th of July. Note the date, 8th of July 1941. He's been appointed to be the commander of a city that's still deep within the Soviet Union. And so that was a job that was given to him, probably because it was too old for a field command. I mean, I do appreciate that there were people older than he was. Rundstedt, for example. Rundstedt wasn't older than he was. But there were people who were later older than he was, who still had commands. But as a general rule, we could say this about in the Second World War, you had the German army, which was a good the generals were a good 10 years younger than, say, for the French army, and French army generals were said to be sort of flabby and out of condition, whereas the German army, so they were expecting to go running and everything, and Rommel, you get very good accounts of him going running every morning, trying to keep fit. And later we see a situation where the Soviet generals are in general around 10 years younger than the German generals. In the later part of the war. Now, the capture of Kyiv in 1941 is the greatest military victory or defeat, depending on the way you look at it, in the history of warfare. If you look at the size of this huge pocket, which managed to capture 660,000 people. It's an incredible number of soldiers who were captured. And the reason they were captured was largely because Stalin refused to evacuate when it was possible to do so. Kyiv was captured from the east, not the west, which also may seem a bit illogical. The generals themselves are quite unhappy about the fact that they were able to capture any bridges over the Dnieper. Now, the river Dnieper is really, really big, and it's certainly, to my eye, if you look at it in Kyiv, for example, and compare it to what it looks, so the Rhine, maybe the Rhine, as it sort of gets towards the sea, or the distributaries of the Rhine. They seem pretty big. The Dnieper is a really powerful river, very, very large, and so I mean, getting bridges across it would have been something very important, I think, for the Germans. The policy of the Nazis, as far as cities were concerned, was not to capture them. The reason they didn't want to capture cities is because cities, they could involve street fighting, which is on attrition. Now, the German army was based on fast maneuver above all, I do appreciate that, there's lots of horses in the German army. They're pulling things by horse and cart, but the main part of it was the maneuverability of the tanks and other fast or armored cars and other really fast moving things. They didn't want to get caught up in any the attrition of any towns. And why, for example, this happened in Stalingrad the following year is completely beyond me. And the only thing I can think is this was the intervention of Hitler, who really didn't understand such things. Now, the policy was not to capture Kyiv. As it was, for example, they reached Leningrad in July 1941, and the policy was not to enter Leningrad, as daft as it may seem. So, if you look at a map, from the Nazi mentality of the time, it makes sense. Now, there's two reasons, another reason why not to, other than the street fighting. They don't want to capture large amounts of people. The reason they don't want to capture large amounts of people is because they don't want to feed them. And this supply situation was another thing which they didn't. By the beginning of September 1941, there were severe supply problems with food for the 6th Army, for example, the one that captured Kyiv. And but this you see everywhere, the inability to a large extent of the German army to get supplies brought to its front units. And so that's that. And then, but there's another thing which happened, and this I think is really important to understanding why the Babi Yar massacre happened. This is my opinion, and I don't know if anybody else thinks this, but I'll try and explain it. In pulling out of Kyiv, the Soviets realized that the Germans would have to house people in sort of barracks and places where the buildings that might have some use for military purposes, and so they mined them, and there were all sorts of mines all over the place. And the fires caused by these delayed mines, it was also believed at the time that there were people sort of going around setting fires and doing this type of thing there. Now, so this took them largely by surprise that these things could happen. Kyiv was captured only after arguments in the army. There was those that said didn't want it, was a waste of time capturing it, and those that said they did want it. Now you've got this Eberhard, this now 74-year-old general. He's sort of insisting on capturing the place. So after all, it's going to be his place, he's going to be taken care of. But all of these disasters have happened, things which couldn't have been forecast, and so therefore he's got this on his head. And I think that this had a role in what happened next. Now, the next thing is to mention that you've got these Einsatz commandos, which have been coming in from the west, traveling along, in from Prech near Leipzig, and they've been killing people as they march along, and they got there as well. And then they decided at that moment somehow to kill off the Jewish population of Kyiv. Now, at the same time, there's another massacre which took place, which is not so well known, which is massacre of Mykolaiv. Now, Mykolaiv is located on the Black Sea. It's close to Kherson, and in Mykolaiv there were approximately even more 40,000 people were killed over a period of around 2 weeks. Now, these massacres took place in various locations, and this was Otto Ohlendorf who was largely responsible. And I've heard it said that there were people who committed those involved in both massacres, but I find that a little bit difficult to believe. But it may have been possible. On the 19th of September 1941, that's the day that Kyiv was captured, Sonderkommando 4A, which was led by August Hefner and Adolf Janssen, arrived. Now, normally these people well behind the front, they didn't want to get involved in anything like this, and they would have experienced this with these explosions. Indeed, one of the explosions hit the headquarters of Army Group South on the 24th of September. So they obviously, whoever planted these things thought ahead and thought, well, okay, well, this could be sort of one of the buildings that's going to be used. Let's try and blow this up. Now, on the 26th of September, Eberhard met Friedrich Jeckeln, who was the commander of Einsatzgruppe C, Otto Rasch, and Paul Blöbel, and who was head of Sonderkommando 4A of Einsatzgruppe C. Einsatzgruppe C, sorry, and there's August Hefner was there, but Hefner was important because he gave us an account of this after the war. But we also have the communications that were sent by Otto Rasch saying that the army was in agreement with this massacres. Indeed, it was Rasch who said that the Wehrmacht welcomes measures and requests radical action. According to a telegram, I think in my video I said it was Eberhard, but I think it was Rasch who actually said that. This permission was granted very quickly, and I suspect that this came from Hitler himself. The very same day, there were posters put up in Kyiv ordering all Jews to report to a specific location near the train station. And so they're given the idea that people are going to be moved out by rail, but it says there's a difference between the German and the Ukrainian and Russian translations now. And in German it says the word "all Jews must report," but in Russian it uses a different word, which is "Zhidi," which is a negative word. It's like Yids or something like that. But even worse than that. It's a negative word, and so this the word in Russian is evre, and so this use of this word was either a warning, that's possible, or B, it was just it just showed the anti-Semitism of whoever it was that wrote it. Presumably it was a local person, and who after the years, so I mean lifetime of anti-Semitism which is coming from the Russian Orthodox Church, it's not surprising that they may have used a word like that. So in Russian it says, all the Yids of the city of Kyiv and its vicinity must appear on Monday 29th September 1941 by 8 in the morning at the corner of Melnikova and Dr. Rivskaya streets, next to the cemetery, bring documents, money, valuables, warm clothing, bed linen, etc. Any Yids who don't follow this order and found elsewhere will be shot. Any citizens entering the dwellings left by the Yids and help themselves to what they find there will be shot. As it happened, 33,771 people turned up. They went past one control point, which is in the street, and it was there. Effectively, they were forced to take their clothes off and then sent down to a ravine where they were murdered. The shooting took place by Sonderkommandos using machine guns, and there have been claims made that this was made by Soviet auxiliary units, Soviet collaborators who actually did it. But the fact that they were killed by machine guns makes me think that they were, which I've never heard of machine guns being used by Soviet collaborators, like the Travniki men, because they weren't Travniki men, these were Schutzmannschaft. But I don't believe that actually happened. So as far as Eberhard was concerned, he was the person in a way who'd sort of approved all of this, and he held on to his position until the 30th of June 1942. But there were some people in the German army who were really critical of the role he played, and were trying to get rid of him. He was transferred and then to the Army Reserve. He was retired in November 1942, although just before then he got a promotion in the SS. And indeed, the fact that he hadn't been promoted in the army for 19 years should have told him something. Eberhard was arrested in November 1945, and 4 days before his 73rd birthday, on the 8th of September 1947, he committed suicide in his prison in Stuttgart. So that's it, really. That's that. My don't know if I said my opinion very clearly of him there, but I believe that he pushed for this massacre, despite the fact of having no Nazi past or anything like that, because of the incidents that had occurred, and this was a matter of pride for him. That's what I suspect. It wasn't the fact, because the excuse used was, oh, look, they're blowing up the city. But I mean, the cities weren't blown up in other places. All these other massacres that had been committed in Lvov, in Berdichev, in Zhytomyr, in Mykolaiv, and Kherson, and all the other places, Vinnytsia, and all these other places. No, they hadn't been blown up. But the fact, what I think, was this was an embarrassment to him. He came under these young characters who were 25 years, well, Global maybe not 15 years younger than him, but Rash was 23 years younger than he was. So they were on the scene, and they convinced him to actually to do this. This was the only way to do it. Anyway, that's how I see it. I'll have a look at some of the questions. So hello, Mike, Craig, Ben. And the massacre, Jason writes, the massacre there was bad. Where's the location of the ravine where the massacre happened? It's to the west of the city centre. It is actually, I would have to say that it's only in the city centre of Kyiv. So if you're in the, the city centre of Kyiv, I think it's pretty obvious, really, where they've got the big statue, and I've forgotten the name of it now, it's gone up my mind, where the protests were. It'll take you an hour at least to walk there. From there, you have to get a bus or the underground to get there. But it is surrounded by, it's well within the city ring. There's a ring around it. So the city, like Moscow has London has a ring, of course, and Paris has a ring. So there's rings just about everywhere, and it's well within. So it is close. But bear in mind, of course, that Kyiv grew as a result. First of all, as a result of the Second World War, many cities did actually grow. Because people came to the cities because of the situation in the countryside, often. And I think in the case, because there was no law and order, and as far as the Germans were concerned, they were not interested in bringing law and order with them. So they destroyed the existing law and order apparatus, and then just made that a security apparatus for themselves. But they didn't bring with them any ordinal order with. So anyway, that. Kyiv has grown quite a lot, anyway, so Ben notes that Otto Rasch was a doctor. He did the exam twice. He is a very odd character in some ways, highly educated. Now, Paul Blöbel wasn't. The character I mentioned, Hermann Höfler, yesterday wasn't, and he was uneducated completely, and he couldn't even spell Reinhardt. But in the case of Rasch, there is somebody. The war started. The First World War started. He was 17 years old. He went through the war. He comes out with that. He goes and studies law. He gets 2 degrees. He worked as a lawyer in a private lawyer. He was the mayor of Radebeul, which is near Dresden. That's where the beer comes from. He was also mayor of Wittenberg. Okay, it's not such a big place. Then he ends up, because he had been in the these forerunners to the Nazi Party, the German Protection League, Schutz und Schutzbund, and he joined and he was a member of the SS quite from quite a long time, and he was one of these characters more than happy to take part in these killings. Like Ohlendorf is somebody who is really, I don't know. I find as a character, he was so well educated. You can see some of his ideas on economy. I mean, I personally disagree with them, but his economic ideas, I can understand where he's coming from with them. But then he's got these, I don't know, these medieval racist ideas, and he had the power to see them through. Rasch was arrested in 1945. He was put on trial at the Einsatzgruppen trial, but then he was taken off. He was suffering from Parkinson's disease, and he died in 1947 or 48. He was aged 50. He was born in 1897. So he was actually released, and he died about four months later of Parkinson's. Yeklin, who was also he was sent to Riga. He was noted for extreme sadist, and he was captured by the Soviets, put on trial, and he was publicly hanged. Incidentally, I did mention the massacres which took place in Mykolaiv and in I think was it 21st of December 1946, I think it was. December 46 anyway. There was the trial of people involved in these massacres, and there was a public hanging in the main square in Mykolaiv, and it's said that as many as 60,000 people actually attended it. And this was the hanging of those responsible for the massacres which had taken place there. It was 9, if I remember right. 9 of them were put on trial, and 7 got death sentences, and 2 got 20-year prison sentences, if I remember rightly from that. Anyway, and Ben says Dr. Rasch is got a name so close it is scary. Okay, well, thanks for listening. I'll leave it that one for today. And now on a Tuesday, I normally put up a video. I don't know if to put up a video or to do a talk, but there will be something tomorrow at 2000 hours. What it may be, I haven't actually decided yet. I might even come back to this subject. I might get my ideas more clearly arranged in my head of the Wehrmacht's responsibility for this and things I've sort of just skirted over at the moment. But at the moment, anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. I'll give this matter a bit of thought. If it's not on Eberhard, or sorry, it won't be on Eberhard. But if it's not on this subject, it'll be something similar. But for the moment, all the best. Bye for now.